Hi, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Books by the Numbers by Serendipity Literary Agency. My name is Charles Kim. I'm the Senior Editorial Agent at Serendipity, and I am joined today by our wonderful debut author, Kim Taylor, who is the author and illustrator of the new book, A Flag for Juneteenth, a picture book that was just published on January 3rd. So first of all, Kim, congratulations and welcome to Books by the Numbers.
Thank you so much, Charles.
So A Flag for Juneteenth, which is now available everywhere, bookstores, Amazon, etc., is published by Neal Porter Books, one of the most prestigious, wonderful children's picture book publishers out there. So for a debut author to have their book published by Neal Porter it's a huge achievement, and we're really, really happy for you, Kim, and we know the book is going to be a great success. So
Thank you so much. I'm honored.
We are as well to be working with you. So this is Books by the Numbers, and the number that we are going to start off with is the number 26. And the reason why we are doing the number 26 is because you created 26 original quilts to illustrate this book. First of all, let's talk about quilting and how you got into it. Can you please tell us, how did you begin quilting?
Sure. So when President Barack Obama was elected president in 2008, like so many of us, I was just overcome with emotion, joy, also disbelief that an African-American man could be elected president in this country that once had slavery as a legal institution. So there were so many emotions, and I really, really needed to express them. But it seemed like words were not enough. I kind of needed to do something creatively to release my emotion, to express my emotions, my joy. And I decided to, I've always been interested in art. I never went to art school, but I've always loved art so much. And I wanted to do something artistically, creatively, that would not only express all of the things I was feeling, but also, in a way, honor my ancestors. So I had to figure out what type of art I would do. So I started doing some research, and I've always loved fabric since I was a very little girl. Never really was someone who sewed or made clothes or anything like that, but I have always loved fabric. So I said, you know, maybe I could do something with fabric. And I did some research, and I discovered that my West African ancestors, many of the women were expert textile artists, and some were even quilters. And I said, you know, I think I want to try quilting. I was more interested in creating art with quilts rather than traditional quilts, which are also art in their own right. But I wanted something a little bit different, a little bit more forgiving. You know, with traditional quilting, you have to be extremely, you really do need to have your lines perfect. You need to have all those squares lined up. I needed something that was going to be a little forgiving since I was teaching myself. So, so I decided to create an art quilt to recognize the significant moment of having an African-American president. And I created a really beautiful quilt. I did some research, tried to figure out what design I would like to make. And I really surprised myself and made this great quilt with a lot of mistakes that many people probably wouldn't notice, you know, that aren't quilters. But it really did come out beautifully. And it really set off this love and interest and curiosity about quilting. So I just started to do more and more.
That's amazing. So story quilts are an African-American tradition. Can you please tell us about that?
Sure. So many of the African women who were brought over to this country and placed into, bondage in slavery, were, still had this skill, and they used it and developed it when they were enslaved. And they created not only traditional quilts to keep their families warm, but they also used quilting as a way um, to talk about family history, um, religious, religious beliefs, not only from their own backgrounds in Africa, but also as they developed in this country. Um, and so they created quilts about things that were really important to them. They also used quilting in a symbolic way to help other enslaved people to find their way through the Underground Railroad. So they used symbols in their quilts that were not really understood by their enslavers, but were understood by other enslaved people.
That's amazing. That's truly amazing. Now, uh, this book, A Flag for Juneteenth, what I love about it is that there's been a slew of children's books and other books about the new Juneteenth holiday, which President Biden made a federal holiday very recently. Um, how did you discover Juneteenth? What is your personal connection with the holiday?
So it really is quite the story, because I had not heard of Juneteenth until 2014, which is not really that long ago. When I went to school, it was not taught in school. It was never part of my curriculum. I heard nothing about it through my family, so I'm assuming they didn't know anything about it as well either. And in 2014, a friend invited me to a Unitarian church that she belonged to that was having a Juneteenth celebration. And she said, "Hey, I think you'd really like this. Why don't you come along?" And I decided to go. And I was just floored, blown away. There was folk music and poetry readings and people selling beautiful things that they had purchased in Africa on recent trips. And they were talking about those trips. And there was just this whole jubilee celebration, soul food, delicious. I mean, just an air of excitement and joy. And I just could not believe that I had never heard of this. The word was just not in my vocabulary. So when I went home that night, I started to really look up, Juneteenth, and try to figure out what it was that was going on and what I was learning about, and I was really just blown away by how much I learned about Juneteenth. And even though I was excited and happy that I was learning so much about this incredible moment in history, I was also really angry that I was not taught about it in school.
I
So
had never heard about Juneteenth in any of my history classes throughout school, elementary school, junior high school, even in college history classes. I never heard about it. So
it's
I feel
just
the same way.
yeah, it's stunning. So I decided once again that I would have to express myself through quilting. And by then I had already been quilting for a few years, so I had gotten a little better at it, taught myself a few things, a few techniques, and I decided to create a quilt. And it was a very, very big quilt, about 6 feet long, about 4 feet wide, really, really big quilt. And it just had one scene. And it was a couple, two African Americans, holding their baby up into the night sky. And they're holding the baby with one of their hands each, the mother and the father, and then their other hand is down by their sides, but there's broken chains on it. to kind of symbolize the end of slavery and also the promise of, a life free of enslavement. And it really is a beautiful quilt, a very heavily quilted piece. So when you look at it, there's a lot of texture and movement. It's beautiful. And so I bought that quilt back to the Unitarian church that I had visited just a few months before. And they were like, wow, that's incredible. And it was very, very exciting to see the reaction. And then I got into kind of showing it around a few different festivals, and that's not really the ideal place to show off a quilt, especially if they don't
Sure.
like that.
Right.
But what I discovered in doing that, and at a couple of schools, what I discovered was many of the children did not know what Juneteenth was. And some of the adults, many of the adults did not know Juneteenth. And that was 2014, before President Biden signed it into law as a federal holiday. So, the word was still not really out there about what Juneteenth was. And so I decided to write a short story to go along with my quilt. So when I would show it, I would read this short story. And at that time, it was like just some folded papers. I just did some sketches and wrote some words out. And people would say, oh, you should get that published. I'm like, it's really just a supplement to my quilt. And I wasn't really interested in doing anything more with it. But then the pandemic hit in 2020. And like many people, I was stuck at home. I was working from home, but then I didn't have my commute. So I was, once I was finished work, I was able to do things. And I just decided I would tweak my story. At that time, my story was based on my quilt, which only had the couple and the baby. But I decided in order to tweak my story, I needed like a young main character. So I created my character Hulda and wrote this story kind of through her eyes. And I am like really, really, really excited about the way it came out. The story really focuses on not only the excitement of the time of learning about their freedom, but also focuses on community. And, it takes a village to raise a child. It really does show this story through her young eyes. And I'm really excited about the way it came out.
That's a perfect segue into talking about the publishing process, because once you had the story and you wanted to share it with the world, you decided to reach out to Serendipity. And I'm going to pause a second and tell our viewers about what the submission process is. Our website has a whole portal, which we actively read and keep. And sometimes we can have as many as, we have thousands, sometimes as many as 4,000 unsolicited submissions in children's literature, in adult literature, fiction, nonfiction, every kind of genre you can think about, and children's books for kids of all ages. Folks out there who have stories just like you that they want to share with the world, they come to our website and they submit. And there aren't that many literary agencies that accept unsolicited submissions. And many publishers, especially publishers and imprints within what they call the big five publishing houses, don't accept unsolicited manuscripts. And so they only look at books by people whom they know, or people to whom they reach out because they think that that person would have an interesting story, or most frequently they receive submissions from agents like Serendipity. But if the agents themselves are not accepting unsolicited manuscripts, it becomes a very closed, um, difficult system to penetrate and to get your foot into the door.
Yeah.
And so I'm very proud of the fact that our agency, small as we are, that we do our very best to look at and review and respond to the thousands and thousands and thousands of unsolicited requests, queries, submissions that we get every year. And a big part of the work that we do at our agency is to evaluate those. And when we find a diamond in the rough, like we did with you, then we reach out and ask to represent these folks. And that's exactly what happened with you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found us, how you found working with us? I think our viewers would love to hear from the author's point of view.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say that I went into things extremely naively because I just assumed that, I could send this off and people would read it and decide it was great, but I also did my research because I wanted to know what the odds were and I wanted to be prepared for that, And so I found Serendipity by Googling top Black literary agencies, Black owned. I felt like I wanted to be represented for this book by a Black owned agency, and Serendipity was at the top of the list. I knew that I would try to send my manuscript to one agent, and I looked for a few publishing houses that were accepting unsolicited manuscripts. I think I sent my manuscript out to 3 of them. I don't remember who they are now, but I did send it out to a couple. I don't think I heard back from any of them. But I knew that the process was generally about 6 months from what I had read. So I was prepared for that. I don't think in my wildest dreams I ever thought I would get very far with this, but I was also prepared, to kind of do that long wait and to read up on what I could do if no one had an interest. And I thought a little bit about self-publishing and I wanted to know more about that, but I decided to wait a little bit. And I didn't have to wait long because Serendipity wrote back to me the very next day, which when I read that, that's like winning the lottery, really, because, there are so many manuscripts that you guys get that to have someone write back so quickly was pretty
Yeah.
stunning to me. Yeah.
Even I'm a little mystified by how quickly we responded back to you, because we typically read them in the order in which we receive them. And as I said, very often we have to close our portals because we simply have too many submissions to get through. And, it's like, putting a thumb in a very large dike. Like it's you have to sometimes stop the flow so that you can get through what you already have. And I'm not really certain how, our agency responded to you the very next day, but obviously we saw something in it.
Serendipity.
And it's absolutely serendipity. It's true. And that's, I think, why our founder and president, Regina Brooks, named the agency that way, because sometimes it really is through serendipity that authors get discovered, that stories and books get published.
Yes.
Just to back up for a second, books are a pillar of almost any culture. We grow up with books. We give books to our children and to our friends and to our colleagues, and people place such importance in books. But the actual process of publishing, making books, who gets published, how do those people get chosen, how much money do they make, how much marketing and publicity is done for their books, how many resources do publishers put behind this author's book versus that author's book. all of that is a very opaque process.
Yes.
And I think that process is made deliberately opaque because books are power, knowledge is power,
Mm.
books contain ideas, and there's a lot of gatekeeping within the publishing industry to make sure that only the people that that these publishers want to represent and promote are being published. And
Yeah.
so it can be a very, very frustrating process. It's a
Yes.
frustrating process for us as we're trying to find publishers, despite being the largest agency in the country representing writers of color, and having the kind of reputation that Serendipity has. Regina is the first person of color of any gender to sit on the board of trustees of the Association of American Literary Agents, which is the governing body of literary agencies in this country. But there's real gatekeeping going on.
Yes.
95+% of literary agencies in the United States are owned by white folks.
Mm.
Between 80 and 85% of the editors, senior editors, leaders, heads of departments that decide who gets bought, who gets acquired, and what they're paid and how they're marketed are white. And so it's an uphill battle. It can be very frustrating and very time consuming. And your story is quite anomalous, but at the same time, it's very inspiring because you did it. You did the research, you reached out, people reached out back to you, and here you are with your very first book.
Let me just say that I know that people know that it is not a one-man show. There's so much that goes into making things happen in a great way, not just in a mediocre way. And so much of it has to do with your agency and how important making sure that diamond, really shines at the end. And, when I first came to you, like I said, I'm still struggling to call myself an author, even though I'm getting better at it now. But, I was very naive. So I came in there with a book that was 1,600 words for a children's book. And, it was very, very difficult for me to let go of many of those words, especially as a very new author. But it's only through your patience, Charles, and Regina's patience that I was able to get it down to my 800 something words. And it's only by your ability to, see something in me that would allow you to let me really try to work on that editing process on my own. And I feel like I was able to cut my book down in a way that I felt comfortable with. And you were always right there to help and guide me if I needed it. I think that's what an agent is really there for, is to really support and guide. And I feel like I was really supported through this whole process, which is, can be it can be terrifying, and tiring. And, when you have another job, a real job, that you're doing, every day, and then you're coming home to try to make sure things are right with the book. I don't think I could have done any of it without you guys. So I really appreciate it. It was serendipitous for you guys to find me, but it was also for me.
We appreciate you as well. One amazing thing about your book is that, so typically publishers, I think there's a bit of a disconnect between people who are trying to create books and who don't understand a lot about the publishing process, and then publishers, because publishers typically want someone to write the book, and then they want to have some sort of involvement in choosing the style of illustration and the illustrator. So I think a lot of people try to create artwork at the same time that they create the story. And relatively few publishers work that way.
Mhm.
But in this case, you are a fabulous quilt artist, and we had the idea to have you make several quilts that would be featured in the book. That was our original idea. And then Jennifer Brown, the art director for Neal Porter Books, after they acquired the book, thought that you might illustrate the entire book. We thought that they might hire an illustrator whose style could align very nicely with the style of your quilts. And so your quilts would be featured, maybe 6 or 7 quilts would be featured in the book, but then the rest of the book would be illustrated by a traditional illustrator. And the reason why it didn't occur to me at first to illustrate the entire book with quilts was because I knew how time consuming and how painstaking the work was. And like you said, you're a full-time educator, you have a life outside of work, and
Right.
to have to make an entire book, which, as we said at the beginning of this, you made 26 separate original quilts for this book, an amazing amount of work
Yes.
that went into this book, not just writing the story, but then also illustrating the story. But your publisher, really pushed you to illustrate the rest of the book, and they saw how this book could just be substantially better by having your quilts tell the story alongside your text. When they first told us, I didn't know how you were going to react. What did you think when they said they wanted you to illustrate the whole book with your quilts?
So I was terrified because I know how long
Yeah.
it takes to just create one quilt, as it is, uh, with a lot of work and constant work. It took 14 months to make all of the illustrations, over a year. So it was a lot of work. But I was also, beyond the work part, I was really afraid I could not do it. Or that people would not be able to connect with my art because I have a signature where I don't use faces for my people. And, I try to express emotion and other things in different ways than facial expression. So I was afraid that I would not be able to do the book justice. I think that was my biggest fear. Um, and I refused at first. I was like, I feel like, this story is really significant, and I wanted young children to be able to relate. And I felt like, they wouldn't be able to relate to my quilt illustrations. They would be able to relate to painted illustrations. I'm not an artist in that way. So, but, I finally agreed to try it. And I surprised myself. I really did. First of all, just, each quilt panel, each illustration panel is only like 15 by 15 inches. So if there's a whole scene going on in that small space, each piece of material that I use to create a picture is tiny, minuscule. So there's so much very, technical work that's involved in it. So I didn't think I could do it, but I was really surprised by the results. Once I got started, I was really thrilled and extremely committed, and very much in love with my main character. And so I wanted her to really shine throughout the book. And I feel like I was able to do that. And I'm so happy with how it came out.
We are as well. I knew this was a beautiful story when it first came in, and I read it for the first time. And I've been making books in one way or another for nearly 3 decades, and so I understand what the process is and how much can change from the beginning of the
Mhm.
writing process and the corrected manuscript, as we call it, to the final book. And it's just, this book, I think, more than almost any other book I can think of, you know, how much it's changed, how the process and collaboration between the publisher and the author, and with our involvement as well, how much it really transformed the original idea to this beautiful finished product. I mean, I can't just on a Zoom camera, I can't possibly show how gorgeous all of these beautiful, beautiful quilts are. Just absolutely stunning. And the publisher has done a remarkable job of reproducing these quilts, because quilts are they're 2D, but they're also 3D. And the process of scanning these quilts and then working them into the design and then reproducing them on a 4-color printer, all of this is very hard work. And to have had a wonderful partner like Neal Porter Books, who have made so many great best-selling children's books, guide you and us through the process, and to make the book what it is. It's just been a wonderful process to be part of. I'm really thankful to you for having reached out to Serendipity, and really, I feel so gratified that we've been able to bring this book to fruition, and I can't wait to see what you bring us for the next book. I wish you all the success in the world for A Flag for Juneteenth. A Flag for Juneteenth by Kim Taylor, Neal Porter Books, really one of the best books I've ever worked on. And I'm grateful to you, Kim, and to Regina, and to Serendipity, and to Neal Porter Books. Congratulations. I'm very proud of you, and I hope you feel proud of yourself. And I can't wait to see this book out in the world.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you to Serendipity and to Neal Porter Books. I could not have done any of this without all of you.
Okay, I think that wraps it up for this edition of Books by the Numbers. I'm Charles Kim at Serendipity Literary Agency, and Happy New Year to everyone, and keep reading. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.